Hi folks, Christoph the Polish Geek and welcome to another video in the Jojo week because again Steel Ball Run is upon us so soon, so this is very much before the actual release of Steel Ball Run. This is very much gonna be a Jojo week, so yes, we are continuing a Jojo week. This time I decided to rank all the Jojo main villains from my least favorite to my favorite. Like I initially considered to rank all the parts of Jojo, but I decided that no, I'm not ranking all the parts until Steel Ball Run is completed, because I'm hearing that Steel Ball Run is apparently the best part from the fellow fans who've read the manga, because again, I'm anime first guy, but I'm here from everything I'm hearing, it does sound like Steel Ball Run might indeed be the best, and like I'm loving everything I'm hearing so far, and again, all the fellow fans told me that this is very much the best part, and that's why I'm not gonna rank all the parts until Steel Ball Run is fully completed, and then I'm gonna rank all the parts with Steel Ball Run included in the ranking. But so instead I decided to rank all the main Jojo villains, again from my least favorite to my favorite, and this admittedly is the hardest ranking I ever had to compose, because I actually think every Jojo villain greatly works for their narrative, and I don't think any of them is a badly made villain. Like I think all of them are spectacular villains, and each of them amazingly well works for their own narrative. So this ranking is purely in terms of how much I enjoy watching each individual character, like basically by how their voice, like how much fun they're to watch and all that, and their scenes, like yep, I'm purely judging that in terms of how much subjectively I enjoy each of those villains, because again, I think all those villains are really amazing for their narratives, and there is nothing I would change about any of them. Again, I think they're all great for their narratives, and all just simply work. So that's why this ranking is purely in terms of how much I enjoy each of those individual villains, because again, none of those are bad villains, they're all great. It's just that number 1 is my favorite and number 5 is my least favorite, but I think all of them greatly work for their narratives. So again, this ranking is purely in terms of how much I enjoy each of those individual Jojo villains. And coming in number 5 is definitely the most vile and evil and disgusting of all the Jojo villains, which by the way isn't a bad thing. Like sometimes those type of evil, despicable villains you just want to see suffer very much work for a narrative, like it does very much here, and that's the boss of Passione, Diavolo. And yeah, as I just said, I think this guy is by far the most evil, vile, and despicable of all the Jojo villains. Like that's the guy that literally tries to kill his own daughter to keep his identity a secret. Like what a monster. And even his name fits in, Diavolo, which in Italian means the devil. And what's also interesting about Diavolo is that throughout most of the story, his identity is actually kept a secret, which is kind of supposed to be the point. Like no one knows who the true boss of Passione is, and actually, like I've seen some fans not really liking it about Diavolo, that apparently that in their opinion that makes him so mysterious but completely takes away from giving him any personality and all, but I have to strongly disagree. I actually think it's one of very much the appealing parts. Like, we knew plenty of about previous villains, so now that we know so little of him and we don't know about him until the heroes jump to the top and discover the boss of Passione, it's kind of actually appealing. And as I said, he's also the most evil and vile of all the Jojo villains, which also very much, in my opinion, works in the story's favor, because he's not like one of those love to hate villains. Just hate him and want to see him suffer. But I think that it's very intentional and works very amazingly well, and as a result, his final fate that he gets is very well deserved. But overall, Diavolo, again, I think he's a great villain and he greatly works for the narrative, and I don't really have any problems with him as a main villain. But as a character and how much I enjoy watching each of them, he just comes at the bottom of the list. But again, he's still great, especially for the narrative he works. As I said, there's no bad Jojo villain. I said he's the vilest. I say actually maybe Chocolata, his underling, is actually the vilest, but we're talking about the major villains. So, Diavolo, the most evil and despicable Jojo villain, at number 5, which again, still a great villain. And coming in number 4 are the Pillar Men. And yes, I think the Pillar Men are also really great villains, and what I like about them is that you could argue that they are the most powerful of all the JoJo villains. Well, at least when it comes not to using the stand powers, because they are probably the only villains that aren't stand users, since in Battle Tendency that was before the stands were introduced yet, but I like the Pillar Men. I like their design, how they basically resemble the Aztecs, and it's not even coincidental. It's very much implied that the Aztecs had apparitions of them and were very much inspired by their looks. So I like that detail, but I also like how different each of them are. Like, Wamu is this very honorable warrior, while Cars is basically this really vile guy that just wants to destroy the world. And then AC/DC is kinda like Cars, but with several elements of Wamu. But I also really love their dynamic of, again, Wamu, Cars, and AC/DC and all. And I think their voice actors are great, and the fights with each of them are really spectacular and all that. And I also like how in the first part, basically, Dio put on this mask to turn into a vampire, but now in part 2 of Battle Tendency, we're fighting basically ancient beings that created those stone masks in the first place and all. So yes, I think the Pillar Men are great villains. I really like their dynamic, their designs are awesome, and the fights with them are great. So, the Pillar Men at number 4, which again, they're still great villains, it's just that the next 3 are really special. And coming in number 3 is, of course, the most recurring JoJo villain and the most well-known, most certainly, and basically you could say the main JoJo villain, since again, he's the most recurring one, and basically the arch nemesis of the Joestars himself, Dio Brando. And yep, I think Dio is really spectacular. He's so charismatic, and he's also, on the other hand, he's just so vile because of the way he tries to make Jonathan's life so miserable when he first arrives at the Joestar mansion, and then he basically becomes even worse when he poisons their father. I mean, Jonathan's father, his adopted father, turns into a vampire and then becomes even more powerful. And then he basically comes back in part 3 because he drowns at the bottom of the ocean at the end of part 1. But then he comes back at part 3 when the coffin is taken out by fishermen, and then he develops the most powerful stand. I mean, until part 6, but we'll get to that later. And then he develops, up until this point, the most powerful stand in the world, with the ability to stop time, and he has some really amazing lines, and he's so awesome to watch and all that. And yep, I mean, it's Dio, come on, who doesn't love Dio? And at number 2, and often the fan favorite of the JoJo villains, and for a very good reason actually, but at number 2 is Yoshikage Kira from Diamond is Unbreakable. And what I love about Yoshikage Kira, and plenty of other fans love about him too, is that he's very different from all the villains up to this point. Like, both Dio and the Pillar Men had some grander ambitions, with the Pillar Men wanting to destroy the world, while Dio wanting to basically become a god. But instead, Yoshikage Kira just wants to live a quiet life. And the only thing that differentiates him from other people that want to live a quiet life is that he's a serial killer with fetish for female hands. And as a result, he on one hand wants to live a quiet life as a serial killer, but also wants to conceal his identity, which very much comes in handy because he obviously happens to be a stand user, and his stand killer queen basically makes it completely so that all the traces of his former victims completely disappear, and that's why he can easily conceal his identity. But Yoshikage Kira is such an excellent villain, and I love how he basically is able to amazingly well conceal his identity, and even when the heroes actually uncover his identity, he still manages to get away and basically steal an identity of someone else and all that. And anytime he's on screen, there is just this such a big tension and a really amazing music, perfectly fitting for a serial killer. And I also love the various suits he wears, like the blue one, purple one, and the white one when he adopts a new identity. And again, he's also very charismatic and really interesting and so fun to watch. So yes, Yoshikage Kira at number 2. But at number 1, and my ultimate favorite JoJo villain, and that isn't changing anytime soon, is Enrico Pucci.
Father Pucci? A while longer. After all, I am on the overnight duty until I must give the service on Sunday.
And what I love about Enrico Pucci is he's a Catholic priest and a disciple of Dio, and he actually believes that he's very much doing God's work. Actually, I mean, he obviously isn't. I mean, he's been very much corrupted by Dio, so he now just thinks that doing Dio's work is basically doing God's work. And an interesting thing is Dio actually means God in Italian, but yep, I love Enrico Pucci. And also, he basically also has the entirely most powerful stand in the entire JoJo world of Made in Heaven, and achieves something that none of the previous villains were ever able to achieve. And what I also love about Enrico Pucci is that he is kind of tragic with all his backstory and all, but thankfully that very much doesn't detract from his evil villainy, and that he still is very much first and foremost an evil villain that has to be stopped at all costs. Because again, I often complain about sympathetic villains, but Enrico Pucci isn't sympathetic one bit. He's a perfect balance of how to make a villain tragic and give him a relatable and understandable backstory, but still very much keep him first and foremost as a vile, evil villain that has to be stopped at all costs. And Enrico Pucci is a perfect example of that. And the final battle with him is probably the most spectacular battle in all of JoJo universe. And also the voice actor for him is just phenomenal and all. And I just really love Enrico Pucci. He's such an amazing JoJo villain and very easily my favorite. Well, everyone, so here is my ranking of all the JoJo villains from my least favorite to my favorite. Again, they're all really great villains and all of them amazingly well work for their narratives. It's just that some are even cooler than others. And now that we know that Steel Ball Run's main villain is a president of the United States, Fanny Valentine, and everything I'm hearing he's also one of the most popular JoJo villains and all. So let's see, where will Fanny Valentine rank when he finally comes in? But what matters is that Steel Ball Run is finally upon us. So this is again my ranking of all the JoJo villains. And where will Fanny Valentine rank? We will see, but whatever, that concludes another JoJo video. So again, thank you all of you for checking out this video. Press the like button, please subscribe to this channel. And again folks, Steel Ball Run is upon us very soon, and I will talk to you also very soon in another JoJo video. Talk to you then, bye.